Have you ever wondered what happens when the noise of life fades away? When the kids are grown, the house is quiet, and time itself slows down just enough for you to finally hear your own thoughts? Most people think aging means silence. They imagine old age as stillness, the rocking chair, the teacup, the quiet hum of a television left on for company. But there's another kind of silence that few dare to talk about, a silence filled with feeling, desire, memory, and the soft pulse of something we pretend disappears with age, but never really does. Because no matter how many birthdays pass, no matter how gray the hair or how wrinkled the hands, the heart and the body remember. This is the hidden story of what really happens inside people as they grow older. A story of longing that never fully dies, of emotions that stay alive long after youth fades. A story about intimacy, not just physical, but emotional, spiritual, and profoundly human. You see, when we're young, the world tells us to chase connection, to fall in love, to explore, to experiment, to express. But as people age, society slowly takes that permission away. It's as if there's an invisible rule. Old people don't need that anymore. And yet, behind closed doors, behind the quiet smiles and polite hellos, something very different happens. Older adults, seniors, elders, people in their 60s, 70s, even 90s still feel everything. The longing for touch, the hunger for connection, the warmth of being desired, and the secret wish to still feel alive. It's funny, isn't it? When you're young, intimacy is about excitement. When you're older, it's about existence. Because for many seniors, those moments of closeness, even imagined ones, are not about lust. They're about remembering that they are still here. Loneliness has a way of sneaking into old age quietly. It doesn't arrive with thunder or tears. It just slips in during the empty afternoons, during quiet dinners, during long nights when no one calls anymore. And in that silence, many begin to turn inward, not out of shame but survival. They remember how it felt to be touched. They remember how it felt to laugh in someone's arms. They remember how alive the human body can be when it's not just a vessel for breathing, but for feeling. And so they start seeking comfort in the only place they can still find it, within themselves. For some, that comfort is in music. For others, in prayer. For many, it's in moments of private reflection, moments where they reconnect with their own body, not as something broken or aged, but as something that still responds to emotion, to memory, to touch. And it's in those moments that many seniors rediscover something powerful, something they thought was gone forever. The simple truth that they still have a right to pleasure, to joy, to feeling, but they keep it secret because the world doesn't let them talk about it. When an older person speaks about loneliness or longing, society looks away. When they mention desire, people laugh nervously. And when they dare to say they still crave touch, genuine, warm human touch, people act as if it's inappropriate. So they hide it. They smile at family dinners. They laugh at jokes about old people and act like they don't care. But when the night comes, when everyone's asleep, when the world finally leaves them alone, they let the truth breathe. And that truth is this: intimacy never really dies. It just changes form. It becomes softer, more reflective, less about the body and more about the soul. It's not about conquest or passion or novelty anymore. It's about closeness, memory, connection, comfort. Many older adults aren't looking for adventure. They're looking for belonging, for that same warmth that once made them feel like life was worth waking up for. They might not talk about it, but it's there, in their eyes, in their laughter, in the quiet sighs they take when a song reminds them of someone they once loved. Shores down. We live in a world obsessed with youth. Every commercial tells us to fight aging. New creams, new surgeries, new pills. But what if aging isn't the enemy? What if it's simply the body reminding us that life is precious, that we only stop living when we stop feeling? And so many seniors, quietly, privately, refuse to stop feeling. They dance when no one's watching. They flirt in subtle glances. They take care of their bodies in ways that might surprise you, not out of vanity, but out of respect. Because to feel desire, even at 80, is to feel alive. It's to whisper to yourself, I still matter. But we rarely give them credit for that. Instead, we box them in. We call them sweet, wise, cute, anything but human. We forget that inside those aging bodies are people who once felt everything we feel right now, and often they still do. They still remember first loves. They still dream about second chances. They still imagine what it would feel like to be seen again, not as someone's grandparent, not as a senior citizen, but as a whole feeling person. And sometimes they do something about it, not out of rebellion, but remembrance. Because deep down they know something the young often forget, that the human need for connection never really leaves us. When I talk to seniors, and I've spoken to many, there's always this moment in their voice when they go quiet, right before they say, I miss being touched. It's not about sex. It's not even about romance. It's about presence, about knowing someone still wants to be close to them, still finds them worthy of touch, of warmth, of love. And that's the part people don't understand. They think aging erases desire, but aging only erases the noise around it. The feelings stay. They just grow quieter, deeper,
more meaningful. And when you spend years, even decades, without that kind of intimacy, without someone reaching across the bed, without that simple act of being held, you start to crave something that isn't even physical anymore. You crave connection with yourself. You begin to rediscover what your own hands, your own breath, your own body can remind you, that you, that you are still alive. And that's the real secret most people never talk about. Not the act itself, not the shame or the secrecy, but the why, the quiet aching why. Because deep down, all of us, young or old, want to feel wanted. We want to feel seen. We want to feel something. And when the world stops giving us that, when society turns away and says you've had your turn, some of us find it again in small, quiet, sacred moments alone. Those moments are not dirty. They're not shameful. They're human. They're healing. Every senior carries decades of love, loss, laughter, and heartbreak in their bones, and in those years are millions of memories that shaped who they are. The body remembers, not just the pain, but the pleasure too, and when they reach back to touch those memories, they're not chasing youth, they're chasing themselves. That's what most people never see, that behind every polite smile of an older person is a library of emotions still waiting to be read. Every wrinkle has a story, every sigh hides a secret, and sometimes that secret is simply this: I still feel, I still want, I still love. And maybe that's something we should all remember, because one day, that will be us too, and maybe then we'll understand.
Sometimes I think the greatest misunderstanding about aging isn't that people lose passion, it's that they lose the permission to express it. Because when you live long enough, you start to see how society quietly tells older people to disappear, to make themselves smaller, to stop talking about what they feel, what they want, what they miss. But emotions don't age. The hunger for connection doesn't retire at 65. The need to be seen doesn't vanish when the hair turns gray. It's still there, it just gets buried under years of expectation, of silence, of pretending. And that pretending is what hurts most, because deep down, every person still has that spark inside, that electric pulse that whispers, I'm still here, I still want to feel alive. But life changes. The people you once held close, they leave, they move, they pass, the world around you starts to shrink. Suddenly, the house that used to be full of noise and laughter feels too quiet, too large, too full of memories, and you realize that the moments of connection you once took for granted now exist only in your head. That's when reflection becomes a kind of intimacy. You start remembering the sound of laughter in the kitchen, the smell of perfume on a pillow, the way someone's hand felt when it reached for yours. It's not about missing the act, it's about missing the meaning behind it. That need, that small ache in the heart never goes away. Even if the body slows down, even if the face changes, that desire to be touched by kindness, by warmth, by understanding, it stays. So many seniors turn inward, not because they've given up on love, but because they're learning to find it in new places. They learn to give it to themselves, to treat their own hearts gently, to say, I am still deserving of tenderness, and that's something powerful. Because self-love isn't just a phrase written on a wall or in a book. For someone in their later years, self-love can be survival. It's the way they learn to live again, to smile again, to forgive themselves for the years lost to silence, to realize that feeling something deeply, even if it's private, even if no one else knows, means you're still capable of wonder. And maybe that's what makes this stage of life so beautiful. Because in youth, desire is loud, it's wild, impatient, impulsive, but in age it becomes quiet, sacred. It's not about chasing excitement, it's about cherishing existence. You begin to see that intimacy isn't just about another person. It's about the moments when you feel connected to your memories, to your body, to your breath, to your soul. For some, that happens when they dance alone in the living room to a song from 1972. For others, it's when they light a candle, sit by a window, and feel gratitude that they're still here, that they survived, that they still feel. And when you look at it that way, aging becomes less about loss and more about rediscovery. It's about finding the small, quiet ways to love yourself again, to realize that what you thought was gone was never gone. It was waiting for you to come back to it. There's this truth that so many older people carry but rarely say aloud, that the human heart never runs out of love to give, it just runs out of people to give it to. But the beautiful thing is, love doesn't need a destination to exist. Sometimes it's enough to just feel it, to let it warm you from the inside, to let it remind you that you're still human, still breathing, still here. And maybe that's the quiet revolution happening all around us, unseen, unspoken, but very real. Older people everywhere are learning to reclaim what was always theirs, the right to feel deeply, to laugh, to desire, to cry, to remember, to be more than a label, more than a stereotype. Because aging isn't the end of passion, it's the beginning of a deeper kind. The kind that comes with knowing yourself, the kind that's stripped of pretense. The kind that's made of honesty, gratitude, and courage. And when you see it that way, those quiet moments, the ones spent alone, reflecting, remembering, even dreaming, aren't sad. They're sacred. They're the body's way of saying you're still part of this story. When you really think about it, we spend our lives chasing others, wanting someone else to make us feel loved, wanted, alive. But what if, in the end, the real lesson is learning how to give those things to ourselves? To know that love never really leaves, it just changes direction. It flows inward, it heals what the world forgot to touch. And maybe that's what the hidden desire of aging truly is. Not a secret shame, not a taboo, but a silent act of remembering. I am still worthy of love.
I am still human. I am still me. So the next time you see someone older, sitting alone in a cafe, smiling at a memory, humming to a song, remember that there's a whole universe inside them. A lifetime of stories, emotions, laughter, and tears. They've lived enough to know that love isn't measured by who gives it to you, but by how willing you are to still feel it. And in that way, maybe they're freer than the rest of us, because they've stopped pretending. They've learned that love, true love, doesn't end when youth does. It simply changes shape. So if you're watching this, and you've ever felt like age makes you invisible, if you've ever thought that passion was something you had to leave behind, don't believe that lie. Because as long as you can feel warmth in your heart, as long as you can close your eyes and remember what joy feels like, you are still capable of the most powerful intimacy there is. The one between you and your own soul. Age doesn't take that away. If anything, it gives it back. Because when you strip away the noise, the judgment, the rush, what's left is the most honest kind of love there is. It's quiet, it's gentle, it's real. And maybe, just maybe, that's the secret truth about growing older. That we don't stop wanting to feel, we just learn to feel differently, more deeply, more meaningfully. And when we finally understand that, aging stops being something to fear and becomes something to honor. Because inside every older person is still the same heart that once beat wildly for love, for life, for connection. And that heart still beats, quietly, beautifully, waiting for the world to remember that it never stopped. If this spoke to you, don't forget, someone out there needs to hear it too. Share it, talk about it. Because the truth about aging isn't silence, it's love, still whispering even after all these years. And that is something we should never be ashamed of. You know what's strange? The older you get, the more invisible you start to feel. Not because you've changed, but because the world stops looking. It's almost as if people assume that once you've lived long enough, your story is already over. But what they don't realize is that for many, the story is just beginning again, differently, quietly, beautifully, because there comes a moment somewhere between the birthdays and the memories when you realize something powerful. You're still capable of falling in love with life. After the grief, after the years of noise and chaos, after the heartbreak and the healing, you start to see yourself differently. You start to understand that love doesn't always arrive dressed in fireworks and grand gestures. Sometimes it shows up in small ways, like making yourself a cup of tea in the morning and smiling at the steam that curls up like hope. You begin to notice that your own company isn't loneliness anymore. It's peace. It's quiet confidence. It's learning that being alone doesn't mean you're unloved. It means you've learned how to love yourself in silence. For so long, the world teaches us to measure worth through relationships. Who we're with, who loves us, who we wake up beside. But as the years go by, something changes. You start realizing that companionship doesn't always have to be romantic. Sometimes it's found in the warmth of friendship, in laughter shared over memories, in the comfort of someone who listens without judgment. And that kind of connection, the kind built on understanding rather than attraction, becomes gold. Because it doesn't fade, it deepens. I think the most beautiful thing about growing older is that you finally stop performing. You stop chasing who you think you're supposed to be, and you start embracing who you really are. You stop apologizing for the wrinkles, the gray hairs, the stories written across your skin, because each one means you lived, you felt, you cried, you tried, and somehow you survived. And that survival, that's its own kind of beauty. When you reach that point, you begin to understand that love, real love, isn't about perfection or youth. It's about presence. It's about being there fully, even when it hurts. It's about holding space for yourself and others in a world that often forgets how. And sometimes you find that love in unexpected places. Not in someone new, not in a grand reunion, but in the mirror. When you look at yourself and for the first time in years you don't feel regret. You feel gratitude. Gratitude that you made it this far. Gratitude that you still have time to feel. Gratitude that you can still give love and receive it in ways that go beyond words. The truth is, aging doesn't take away our capacity for love. It gives us more reasons for it. Every loss makes the next connection more sacred. Every heartbreak teaches you what's worth keeping. And every year makes you realize that love doesn't have to be loud. It can be soft and still mean everything. I've met people who say, I don't need anyone anymore. But you can always hear something in their voice. A little tremble, a little ache. Because the truth is, everyone needs someone. Even if that someone is just a friend, a neighbor, a kind stranger who remembers your name. We all need to feel seen. We all need to know that our presence matters to someone. That's what intimacy really is. Not what happens in the body, but what happens in the space between two souls who see each other clearly. And when you grow older, you realize how rare and beautiful that is. To be truly seen, to be accepted not despite your past, but because of it. So you start giving that kind of love to others. You start speaking gently. You start forgiving faster. You start listening more than you talk. Because you know how it feels to be unheard. You know how it feels to be lonely. And you don't want anyone else to feel that way again. There's something about reaching a certain age that changes the way you love. It becomes slower, deeper, more intentional. You stop loving people for what they can give you, and start loving them for who they are. Messy, imperfect, real. And maybe that's what makes love later in life so extraordinary. It's not rushed. It's not confused. It's not about proving anything. It's about peace. Two hearts that have seen too much of the world, finally finding rest in each other. But even if you never find that person again, that peace still exists, because it lives inside you, in the way you treat yourself, in the way you care for your body. Not because you want to look young, but because you finally respect it for carrying you this far. That's self-love in its purest form. And when you learn to love yourself like that, the loneliness starts to lift, because you realize you were never really alone. The truth is, we spend half our lives trying to be loved, and the other half learning how to give love without losing ourselves. But the moment you realize that you can be both the giver
and the receiver. That's when freedom begins. Freedom from judgment, freedom from shame, freedom from the idea that love belongs only to the young. Because love doesn't care how many birthdays you've had. It doesn't care about wrinkles or gray hair or aching bones. It only cares that your heart is still beating, and it still is. And that's what makes aging beautiful. You begin to see love not as a possession, but as a pulse, something that runs quietly through everything you do. You find it in the sunlight, in the sound of laughter, in the memories that refuse to fade. And you realize that even when you're alone, you're surrounded by it. I think that's what healing really is. It's not forgetting. It's not moving on. It's learning how to carry your past with grace. It's letting go of the need to be perfect and holding on to the truth that you're enough right now as you are. Because aging isn't about loss. It's about return. Return to the self. Return to honesty. Return to the kind of love that doesn't need approval to exist. And once you find that, everything changes. You stop hiding. You stop pretending. You start living fully, freely, fearlessly. Because you finally realize that it was never too late. Not for love, not for connection, not for happiness, and certainly not for you. So if you're listening to this, and you've been telling yourself that your best years are behind you, stop. They're not. Because the truth is, your best years begin the moment you start living for yourself again. The moment you stop apologizing for wanting joy. The moment you remember that love, in all its forms, still belongs to you. Because no matter how many years have passed, your heart still knows how to feel. And as long as it does, you're still beautifully, completely alive. And that's something worth celebrating. Soft background. You know, there comes a moment in life when silence becomes louder than sound. When the laughter of a house once full fades into memories, and you start to ask yourself, what happened to me? Not in a sad way, more like a whisper of curiosity. Because life, as it turns out, never really stops moving. It just changes tempo. People think that when you get older, your world gets smaller, that you stop wanting, stop dreaming, stop feeling. But the truth is that sometimes the fire inside burns even brighter, because you finally understand what that fire means. When you're young, desire is noise. It's chaos. It's excitement without depth. But when you're older, desire becomes quiet. It becomes something sacred, a conversation between your soul and your skin. It's not just about love or companionship. It's about the need to feel alive, to be seen, to be touched, not just by hands but by attention, by care, by the presence of another heartbeat in the same room. That's what so many people miss when they look at the elderly. They see wrinkles, but they don't see the stories. They see years, but not the moments. They forget that the heart doesn't age, and that's where it hits hardest. In the quiet evenings, when the world feels distant, you realize that time may have taken your speed, but it gave you depth. It gave you the courage to look inward and say, I still matter. My emotions still matter. There's a certain grace that comes with age, but grace doesn't mean giving up. It means learning to move differently, to love differently, to find meaning in softer places. And maybe that's why older hearts often rediscover themselves in private moments, because they've spent so long giving to everyone else, to children, to families, to careers, to expectations. Now for the first time they get to give back to themselves. That's not selfishness, that's healing, that's self-respect, that's love coming home. And when you start to understand that, when you realize that pleasure, joy, and emotional connection aren't bound by age, the whole idea of getting old begins to lose its sting. Because aging isn't the end of passion, it's the evolution of it. You start realizing that every heartbeat is still an invitation, not to go back, but to go deeper. To feel the kind of connection that doesn't demand perfection, only presence. Maybe that's the hidden gift of aging. The moment you stop chasing and start appreciating. When you look at your reflection and for the first time, instead of seeing what's gone, you see what remains. Every wrinkle becomes proof of laughter. Every scar, proof of survival. Every quiet night, proof that you made it through. And then you begin to understand something that most people never will. That intimacy isn't a physical act. It's a spiritual memory. It's the body remembering what it feels like to be wanted, even by your own soul. People rarely talk about that because society teaches us to stay silent about what we feel when we age, to pretend we've transcended desire, as if wanting something human makes us fragile, but in truth it makes us real. Because the opposite of love isn't hate, it's emptiness. And the moment we stop wanting to connect, we stop being fully alive. So when I talk about seniors craving intimacy, I'm not talking about scandal. I'm talking about survival, about a heartbeat still reaching out, whispering, I'm here, I still feel, I still dream. And you know what's beautiful? Once you stop hiding from that truth, you stop hiding from life itself. You stop apologizing for your humanness. You stop shrinking to make others comfortable. You stop pretending that growing older means growing colder. Because the truth is, the older you get, the closer you come to the raw essence of who you really are. That part of you that just wants to hold someone's hand without needing to explain why. That part of you that still wants to dance, even if your knees ache a little. That part of you that still gets butterflies when someone looks at you like they see you. And if that's not living, then what is? Sometimes I think the world is afraid of older people's emotions because it reminds them that time doesn't protect them either. That one day they'll crave the same tenderness, the same connection, the same small affirmations that they matter. And maybe that's why older love stories rarely get told, because they're not glamorous, they're not loud, they're quiet revolutions. Proof that passion doesn't retire. It evolves. It becomes slower, more deliberate, more sacred. It stops being about performance and becomes about presence. The touch that says you're still here. The look that says I still see you. The silence that says we've lived enough to not need words. And in that silence there's power. A power that doesn't beg for youth. It celebrates time. It celebrates memory. It celebrates the sheer miracle of still wanting to feel anything after all these years, because let's be honest, life will take things from you. People, health, opportunities, but if it can't take your curiosity, your heart, your need to connect, then it never really wins. That's the secret no one tells you. You don't stop living when you get old. You start living honestly. You start saying what you mean. You stop performing for approval. You begin to understand that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's wisdom. And that's when you realize the deepest kind of love you can ever experience isn't about who touches your body. It's about who touches your spirit. It might be a partner. It might be a friend. It might even be you, finally forgiving yourself for all the years you thought you weren't enough. Because the truth is, you always were.
So if you're listening right now, if you're sitting in that quiet evening light wondering whether the best parts of you are behind you, let me tell you something. They're not. They're waiting for you. In the next conversation, the next sunrise, the next moment you look in the mirror and smile because you're still here, still feeling, still capable, still brave enough to want. And maybe that's the real definition of intimacy, not something you share with someone else, but something you allow yourself to feel again. That quiet electric pulse that says, I'm still alive. So don't hide your heart. Don't dim your flame because someone told you it's too late. Don't silence your emotions because they make others uncomfortable. Love loudly, feel deeply. And remember, it's not the years in your life that count. It's the life still beating in your years. And if no one's told you this today, you are still beautiful, you are still worthy, and you are not done yet. This has been your reminder that age doesn't erase desire, it refines it. That time doesn't take away your story, it makes it richer. And that no matter where you are in life right now, your heart still knows how to dream. So keep dreaming, keep loving, keep living. Because you're not too old, you're just finally real. If this story touched you, take a moment, breathe it in, and remember there's always more to life than what the world expects of you. And if you believe that too, you know what to do. Subscribe for more.